confronted by a power that cannot see past my skin. My views are viewed as ignorant, my truth always denied. My history is shrouded in a spider web of lies. Isn't this America? Or is this America all a lie?
Of the freedom of speech, somewhere I read. Of the freedom of press, somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right.
How can I pledge allegiance to a country built on lies? Or raise my children to believe they're equal in its eyes? My leaders are assassinated for speaking their mind. So justice never tilts my way. I thought that she was blind. Isn't this America? Or is this America all a lie?
Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop.
Looking in the rearview mirror, terrified by lights, waiting for these paper laws to play out in my life. But now I lay awaiting death, staring in the sky, killed by those sworn to protect me. What a way to die. Isn't this America? Or is this America all a lie?
Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
That's right. Amen. Amen. Thank you, my brother, Preacher Dennis Everett Rhymes, for your music and your message. It is so true. We're yet realizing America, for it to be all that we have dreamed for it to be. But I'm live here in the studio with my special guest friend and brother in the person of State Representative Russell Holmes, who is running to maintain his seat. How are you, sir?
I'm doing outstanding.
Beautiful, beautiful.
I always doing really outstanding when I can, in the middle of my day, hear Dr. King.
I know that's right.
I mean, man, sometimes I just go and listen to, just him speak. I mean, just hearing him with the letter from the Birmingham jail, and just reading and just how provocative that letter is, and how angry he was, like even at the moderate whites, and just said, look, even you want to yell at me? I'm in your city. I'm in the city to make change.
Yes.
And just again, people think he was the Mr. Nice Guy, and he was not. He was there. No, he did not want to be Stokely Carmichael and burn down everything of Malcolm and burn down everything.
Right.
But still, his message was true.
Yeah.
I mean, I think about literally sometimes just I listen to the letter, and then I listen to the speech, the I Have a Dream speech,
yes,
and just hear him talk about just the check that came back insufficient funds. I just can't, so hearing Dr. King in the middle of the day can't help but to make my day better.
Amen. I'm curious. With that said, we're gonna go right into the interview. But with that said, now there's a lot of conversation. The buzzword seems to be equity.
Because equity is the right word.
It's the right word.
Because let me just say, thanks for having me today.
My pleasure.
I was on the radio early this morning, and the conversation was more like what we're going to talk about tonight with transportation and the middle of the bus lane down Blue Avenue. And someone was just, asking me about whether or not I believe the T should be free. Mm-hmm. And I'm a no to that.
Okay.
I'm a no. Now, I'm a yes to the T being free up and down Blue Avenue.
Okay.
But I am an absolute no to equality. Mm-hmm. Because when the T is free, that means everyone gets it for free. Yeah. And I have to remind people, my financial profession, I'm a state rep, of course,
Yes.
But I'm also a financial planner.
Okay.
And I manage funds for, businesses and individuals. And my office is in 200 Clarendon, which is the old John Hancock Tower. We call it the building with the glass. Yeah. And so I travel from Mattapan.
Okay.
And you think about what I leave every day, that community, and I land either at the State House on Beacon Hill, or I land at 200 Clarendon, and so where I arrive. Yes. Those are two very different worlds in one city.
Yes, sir.
And so when I think about the fact that if I were to make the T free, if that was an advocate that I would be, I just think about what we would be thinking when these folks who are living in their $1 million condos, $1.5 million condos, $2 million, $3 million condos, and you want me to have them walk down, where they can literally walk, red line, orange line, green line, and make that free for them?
Right.
While I'm going to make their ride free, where they have all of these options, the best options you can possibly have, because it's just at your fingertips.
Yes.
Versus my neighborhood, I don't think so. So I think we should focus on equity, because equity is important.
Yes.
Because we are limited on resources. Mm-hmm. We as the Commonwealth, we don't have an infinite amount of money. And so when you don't have an infinite amount of money, you still need to target the folks who most need it. Mm-hmm. And so I still want to say my targeting has to be around youth. Mm-hmm. How do we make sure young folks get what they need to make sure they're successful? Mm-hmm. Seniors and disabled. Mm-hmm. And the rest of us that are able-bodied people, let's get to work.
Okay.
Yeah, and so definitely the rest of us who are able-bodied people who are making lots of money or lots of wealth, let's get to work and try to, as a society, be what government is. Because government is the rest of us, right? It is. Yes, we have great-hearted people who want to help other people, right? And so that's where our tax money goes. But I like to just try to remind folks, when that trash is put out on Monday or Tuesday, whenever you put your trash out, and it's gone when you get home, that's called government. And so we do 99% of things right. The lights come on when we want. The streets are on. No one even thinks about the fact that water came out of your fountain this morning, and you never even thought about it.
Sure.
Government.
Sure.
Meaning a decision made by folks in my position 100 years ago to go and take 4 towns in this Commonwealth and move them.
Okay.
And pick them all up and say, you won't be able to have your church here. You won't be able to have your schools here. You won't be able to have your homes. And we flooded to create the Quabbin Reservoir. And so you think about, 100 miles from here, we have water that then flows to the Wachusett and then flows to us here in Boston. Okay. And they're not even getting the water out there. But it is what serves this city every single day. And someone made more than 100 years ago decisions in my role. Something I don't think we could do today. Like, I don't think I could literally say the state legislature today, we could go and just say, all you 4 cities. I can't tell you, because it'll be on the internet, it'll be tweeted, it'll be everything. Like, we're not doing this. But, the fact that is what government looks like. And so often we get yelled at. But I'm going to tell you 99% of the stuff we're doing every day. And it's just that people get angry when that trash is left on the street. That's the 1%. And so part of the job is to make sure that when we're making those mistakes, that we pick them up. And so that's the job, how I see it every day.
So in the context of equity, a lot of conversation on the heels of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matters and equity, and even the medium income for black families in Massachusetts, vice white families, economically, financial, right? So what is your stance, or what is your position and your posture with regard to equity as it relates to slavery, as it relates to racism, classism, those kinds of things that people might feel that this country, first of all, was built on
Not
the backs.
feel. It's true.
Okay.
That's a fact. Go on. You can finish the statement.
Okay.
This country was built on us,
Yeah.
right? And so, do I believe you owe us? Yes, you do.
Okay.
Right. And so the challenge just becomes, anytime we have this conversation, folks say, well, it wasn't me. Right. And so the other part of this conversation say, it wasn't me. I'm not the one who enslaved you.
Mm-hmm.
And so why should I pay you?
Mm-hmm.
And I just like to remind folks, we have to figure out, how do we do this? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm a direct descendant of a enslaved person,
Yep.
then I think I'm owed something. If you came in and, you maybe came in from, where are you from? Where you from?
New Jersey.
Okay, but are you Barbadian? Are you a descendant of an African American
Yes.
slave? Okay, yeah.
Yes.
And so there are lots of folks here
Yes.
who are Jamaicans and many. And so you have to ask, are those folks also supposed to be a part of this reparations or not?
Mhm.
And so I think I've heard many folks say we should look to see those who are direct descendants and figure out how we get compensated.
Mm-hmm.
But however that would work for something that we would pass and be able to actually materialize, I'm a fan of that. The problem still becomes, can we get it passed and can it become real? I hate to promise something I can't deliver. And so when the reparations conversation happened, I'm a sales guy. I want to under-promise and over-deliver.
Amen.
I do not want to over-promise and under-deliver, because that's when folks
Sure.
say, let's kick him out of office.
Sure.
And so
Sure.
on the reparations conversation, I'm a yes. And what does it also mean when you talked about the income
Yes.
inequality?
Yes.
Most of the wealth inequality, though,
Yes.
when people talk about the $6 versus $247,500,
Yes.
most of that is housing.
Absolutely.
And so
Intergenerational at that.
absolutely. Well, a lot of it has happened in the last 2 generations.
Okay.
Right. And so if you
That's
look
two
back at the
intergenerational.
60s, white and black household wealth was about the same.
Okay.
But this housing acceleration and differences has happened in Boston, quite frankly, over the last 50 or 60 years. Right. And so you see how blacks owned up in the South End.
Mm-hmm.
Now we don't own any of that stuff.
Mhm.
And that stuff that we were selling for $30,000 is now worth $2 million.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so we have to be careful, particularly in the area I represent. Lots of us are still our homeowners.
Okay.
So very different than what happened in Roxbury. Many folks in Roxbury were renters.
Okay.
And so when gentrification happened in Roxbury, it was much more, hey, we're selling this entire building.
Mm-hmm.
Mattapan is a little different. And so I just ask folks in Mattapan, an area that I represent, don't sell your home.
Okay.
Because of the fact that certainly I bought my house for $225,
Mhm.
right? It's amazing to me that if you were to appraise it, it's $705,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so if I were to sell it, where would I move? I'd have to move south, right? And so I'm just asking folks, as we continue to deliver in a neighborhood that needs as much resources as possible,
Mhm.
don't leave.
So that's fine for people who already have property. One, we know that actually there are people whose property is being taken from them illegally, right? Because they're not savvy to all this, and you got a lot of crooked developers and people who are coming in. And I know some real cases that this is
Yep.
happening.
Are we talking about Blue Hub? What are we talking about?
I'm talking about Geneva. I'm talking about the Fields Corner area.
Okay.
So we see gentrification. We see every piece of land.
Gentrification is part of a capitalist society, right? So, I mean, do we really want to say we can stop folks from selling it? We can't. It's the society we live in. The question becomes, like I was talking to Marvin Martin, the folks along the Fairmont line. We
Okay.
went and we put these 4 brand new stations in, right? Geneva being one, Mattapan and the others. And there's this discussion still that's resurfaced around, we should have some type of exclusion zone around the Fairmont line, because we know in that area we're going to see some of these pricing.
Okay.
And so that group of advocates are trying to figure out what is the right solution for the BPDA
Okay.
around, can we have some reduction of your taxes and things of that nature, to try to encourage folks to not go and sell their homes, and still to also have it so they're not put in high rents. And so when you say, what does equity look like even on housing or schools or whatever the conversation may be, in all things, I don't care if you're white or black,
Okay.
okay, let's just give to who's in need.
Okay.
That's what I believe we should be doing.
Okay. With that said, so here in Massachusetts, where we are the educational mecca of the world, people come from all over the world for our institutions of higher learning. And so with that said, we know we have the pilot program that they have a voluntary choice to make a payment in lieu of paying taxes for a nonprofit organization. And they're very much the interest off the endowments from Harvard or Northeastern, is quite significant, and the tunes of billions. So do you believe that these institutions should be doing more? And is there things that you would advocate for as a legislator to be able to have those conversations about, one, encouraging to actually make a payment in lieu of taxes? I mean, they talk about real estate as their, taking up real estate and encroaching upon all parts of, like Northeastern, just for an example, that is spreading out all across that community and taking up prime real estate. So they have a responsibility not just to benefit from people who come from all across the world who may stay here or may not.
So this question is easy, but the question, the answer still becomes yes, but the question still becomes, how do we implement it?
Okay.
Like, I hate that we might name the problem, but we need to have the right solutions.
Okay.
And solutions that we can get past.
Okay.
Right. And so payment in lieu of taxes primarily, obviously, is a city question.
Okay.
And so how the mayor enforces that, if she sends me up some legislation that can give her some more sticks instead of just carrots, I certainly will submit it and look to try to get it through the legislature. But obviously, I believe BU, BC, Northeastern. I know Northeastern is the one we chat about the most, simply because it really is encroaching on us the most, or we feel it the most, because BC is doing the same thing, Harvard's doing the same thing, but most of us are not in those communities. Because if you talk to the folks from Brighton, they're certainly feeling it from Harvard in a hard way. And so, and that's a neighborhood that is very hard to now buy in as well, because those prices are going out of control as well. So if the team, the city council, mayor, whatever they can do to send something that they can get across, I can get across.
But it has to come from them to go to you to be able to.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that, because it's about real estate taxes, which is done at the city level.
Sure. And
so I actually haven't seen one yet, a proposal yet, but certainly I'm a yes to getting more out of all of these universities.
And with that more, so money's one thing. The other thing is the underperforming public schools here that we have right in the city. I think it's just, we're talking about Roxbury Community College being in potential receivership, talking about the Boston public school system being in receivership.
Sure.
I mean,
so I advocated strongly against that. Just like I'm advocating strongly against the FTA taking over the MBTA.
Okay.
I believe, just like with Flint or any other, Jackson, Mississippi, or whomever, I believe when we remove the power of local people, that is anti-democratic.
Okay.
And so we in Boston should elect our mayor, and our mayor should run our schools, and we should hold him or her accountable. Now, do I believe that there should be some oversight from the state? Of course. I believe that we should have a standard that all of our schools in the Commonwealth adhere to.
Okay.
And the state oversight should be appropriate to say, hey, here we're seeing standards across this entire 351 towns and cities across the state.
Okay.
And Boston, you're still in the bottom 10 every year. What do we need to do to make sure you get out of this bottom 10? So yes, I believe Secretary Riley and others, Commissioner Riley and Secretary Pizer and others should be all over us. But do I think we should take control from the mayor? I do not. So receivership was, I drafted a letter, and others that signed on, and I feel the same way about the FTA or the MBTA. I think the incoming governor, the current governor, and their team should be responsible.
Okay.
I do believe same rule applies for federally. I mean, we should have a federal transit system that we can compare, and the feds should say to us, MBTA, what you're doing is underperforming and it's unacceptable. But do I want to hand over the MBTA to FTA? Absolutely not. And I hear some folks are saying that. I would not be a fan of that at all.
Okay. Actually, my question wasn't with regard to receivership, but thank you for answering that, because I think that's important. But actually, my question really was more specifically to these higher institutions of learning and what role they can play in being able to, if it's adopt,
train,
whatever,
right.
In terms, whatever, there's resources. That partnership with the school system, with these universities, should be able to balance out some things.
So I'm a BU grad, and BU will say to me often, here are the things we're doing for the neighborhoods.
Okay.
Right? Here are the scholarships we're giving.
Yeah.
And because that is their rebuttal to us.
Sure.
They'd say, here are the funds that we're doing that you should also count other than just your tax money.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying, here are the number of people we're employing.
Yep.
Here are how much they're paying in taxes. And so that is, when I try my best to be just an honest broker and have a conversation with both sides of these, whatever the issue may be.
Okay.
And let's get us all in the room. Let's not sit here and point fingers at one another. I asked BU, Northeast, and everyone else, show me the pieces that you are doing. And I think in each case, they would advocate that they're doing more from all of the other things they're doing than what they would have paid in taxes. And that's how they justify it. But I think let's just have the conversation.
Okay, wonderful. Let's shift to your time. How long have you been in serving an elected position as a state representative?
So in my 12th year.
12th year.
Mm-hmm.
How many? So that's what,
6 terms.
6 terms. And so, and can you talk about, for those who might not know, as you're doing things behind the scenes and maybe in front of the scenes, talk about some of what have you done in that time frame?
So I really look at the job in 3 ways.
Mm-hmm.
One is, can we deliver you constituent services? Will people call and say, hey, I have a person who's in jail,
Yep.
a family member who's in jail, or I have an unemployment problem, or I have a housing problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and just in many, many ways, just being in community meetings, listening to folks is an invaluable part of what I do.
Absolutely.
And I believe I'm much stronger by listening to folks.
Okay.
And so if you look at any literature or any conversation I'm having, I'm going to lead with saying me, Russell Holmes, personally, attends my neighborhood meetings. And over the last 12 years, I've attended well over 2,500 of those meetings. And it is the folks who are most active, most involved in our communities, driving an agenda that I can then take their voices from where I am in the room to the State House.
Okay.
And then in every meeting that I'm looking to be in, I'm taking what's happening at the State House back into that room to make sure that the district that votes the most Democratic voted district in this Commonwealth,
which is your district?
This one, and the blackest district. As it stands today.
That will change with the new Senate seat, or?
With the new House seat, there's a small change.
Okay.
So, interesting you say that. There are only 2 places in this Commonwealth that when you put together 45,000 people, that when you put them together, more than half of those people are black.
Okay.
Only 2.
Okay.
Those 2 are based right around Mattapan. There's no other place. And so where we're sitting today, Rep. Fluker Oakley and I were going back and forth on this redistricting, what makes sense. And today, before the redistricting, it did not make sense that where we're sitting, you had right along Washington Street 4 different reps. You would have Rep. Fluker Oakley, then you have Rep. Holmes, then you would have Rep. Hunt, then you would have Rep. Currently, you would have Rep. Miranda. Then guess what? You would have Rep. Holmes again, right? And so that didn't make sense, right? That you have this neighborhood right here in Washington Street going back and forth. And so what ended up happening is unfortunately, in redistricting, Ashmont Hill will no longer be a part of the 6th Suffolk, but it will now be Rep. Fluker Oakley's district, because she obviously doesn't have someone run against her. Obviously, I hope and pray that folks send me back to the State House, but it now goes pretty simply. It is Rep. Fluker Oakley, Russell Holmes, all the way down on Washington Street, all the way continuously through 4 corners. And at 4 corners, Rep. Miranda, the person who would win in the seat that's Rep. Miranda, picks up. There's no back and forth. And so in those changes, my seat, or the seat that I have the honor of representing today, very slightly becomes less black than Rep. Fluker Oakley, 56% to 57%. But still 93 or so % of the district will be of color.
And what about the new Senate seat?
The new Senate seat is a seat that we created that's obviously it's the only one that's black. But that was something that was done 20 years ago, was the thought that we would break up both of those seats, the one majority seat that was black historically, and put it in 2 different areas. And the coming back together of that seat was something that was important because of the fact that in the way the configuration worked before redistricting, quite frankly, it was majority color, but South Boston outvoted this part of the area of the district. And then on the other side, Jamaica Plain outvoted this side of the district. But so both were majority of color. And to bring both of those back together to have a rock solid black seat and a rock solid Latino seat. There's one now, just a very strong Latino seat in the Senate in Lawrence. And then there's a very strong black and Latino seat in Hamden. So essentially, we're hoping to go from what was no blacks in the Senate. We have now Lydia, but there were no blacks after Linda left, to potentially 3 or 4 in just this one redistricting cycle. So I still say it is just very, very important to be involved in these conversations, and still say what Rep. Fox used to say, and I mentioned this morning, when folks will be running for office, she would say, hey, you guys keep believing you need different Negroes. What you need is actually more Negroes. And so we're hoping to grow the Black and Latino caucus in the House and the Senate just with redistricting. When I was first elected in 2010, when you talk about some of the things we've done, in 2010, there were 10 seats that were majority of color. And then in the 2011 redistricting, all the advocates, Kevin Peterson and others, Barry Lawton and lots of folks who are normally in this room, we advocated very strongly that this is unacceptable. And we went from 10 seats, and many, many others. I should not name drop like that, but they happen to be here, I know often. We went from 10 seats that majority of color across the state to 20, 10 in just Boston alone. And the work now is that was really the baseline and the platform that we built for 2021. And so we went from 20 to now 33. So just imagine in 2010 when I ran in office, there were 10. We have more than tripled that to now be to 33. That is a lot of work, but it does create a lot of opportunities all around the Commonwealth. Randolph, Stoughton, Brockton, Holyoke, Lawrence, you know what I mean? We now have a seat that is majority Hispanic in Chelsea. And it's absolutely going to send a Latino from Chelsea. So we're hoping that is really where we're heading for the work on one of the things we've done.
Okay. So
so I'm sorry. You had asked the question. Yeah. So that was a legislative thing. So so you think about constituent services being very, very important. Legislatively, things such as redistricting being very important, and redistricting, I would say, I've had a strong voice in accomplishing. And then the last thing that we do is around the budget, and just consistently, I sit on the Ways and Means Committee. I sit on bonding. Consistently, as bond bill moves, as the budget moves, I ensure that I continue to deliver resources, financial resources, to this district, such as Lena Park had not gotten funding in the past. Sportsman's Tennis Club had not gotten state funding in the past. The African American Museum had not gotten funding in the past. Funding to NAACP Boston and the like. And so delivering on legislation, on constituent services, delivering on financial resources. The list is long, but I don't know exactly which one you want me to name.
No, whichever you choose to. So we appreciate those. And with that said, let's shift to and I see some things that I'll read here in terms of some of the things that's on your pamphlet. But before I do that, in the context of resources, and you talked about being on the Ways and Means, I understand right now the state of Massachusetts in terms of money is doing extremely well, right? So talk about recovery from COVID money, this opera money, right? Infrastructure, these resources that we have a once in a generation lifetime to maximize those resources as we talk about equity, to use those resources to really facilitate equity and entities who have been intentionally pushed out, underserved, marginalized, disenfranchised. So with those resources, how do you feel like we can be able to seize those resources to really do and structural kinds of changes, or is that even something that you would advocate for those resources to be used for?
Again, so we've run into a problem. The problem is we in the legislature did not realize there's a 1987 rule that these resources, when they get to this large in excess, that we have to actually, by law, return them back to the people. And so we had begun to craft an economic development bill that did exactly what we're talking about, what you're mentioning, with a lens on equity, a lens on how do we come out of COVID? How do we make sure black and brown businesses get the funds they need? How do we make sure that we do things for helping women get back in the workforce, particularly around daycare and daycare centers and things of that nature? But when the funds got to where they are now, there's a little thing in the law that says when we overachieve, we must return. We must return that back to the citizenry, and we must return it in an equal way, not equitably. And so we believe
equally, not equitably. That's a good distinction.
Not equitably. So each one of us will get somewhere in the neighborhood of about 7.5% of our taxes back. And so again, there's a lot of wealth in one side of that conversation. And so we're going to need to deliver somewhere in the neighborhood of $2.95 billion back. We'll know that on September 20th to know the exact number. And so when we were gathering all of the things of what we thought should be a good idea, we had to put it on literally on pause on July 31st to say, let us get this number from the auditor's office to figure out how much we have to return, and then let's see what's left. Because you still have the other half of the ARPA money, about $2.5 billion. And we still have about $1.5 billion left after we give the $3.
Okay.
But just know that $4 billion isn't the same as $7 billion, right? And so, because we still have a budget, at $55 billion, right? So it's not like this is, some infinite amount of money that we don't, if you think about it, we're using about $4.5 billion a month. And so to have about $4.5 billion, that's about a month spend. And so it's not like it may sound like an awful lot of money, but from a state perspective, it's not. And so we will, when we get the actual number from the Attorney General, we will still do things in the manner in which we thought, equitably. But when you pull out $3 million in an equal way, it won't have the same impact.
Thank you for that. I want to go here real quick before we go to some of your accomplishments. Is your perspective? We've talked offline, and I appreciate your support working with myself and State Representative Nika Elugado, who reveres you as a mentor. To be able to draft and pass legislation, the Voting Rights Act that has been passed. There was also the ballot box initiative that was very specific to the Suffolk County House of Correction, the Nashville County Jail. And we're actually implementing that. And this Voting Rights Act kind of codifies even that ballot box initiative for us to really build on what we've already been doing in that specific institution for people to actually exercise their right to vote. I know that here up until 2000 in Massachusetts, people who were incarcerated, who were serving felons, actually could vote. That was stripped from them. My understanding, I learned this from the African American Coalition.
AACC.
They're educating me as they've been driving this legislation, that the Voting Rights Act, as they should. And so with that said, I learned that as a result of the advocacy.
And they have a great write-up on it.
They do.
Yeah, I mean, they have a great write-up on what happened.
Okay.
Yeah, you should make sure you ask the AACC, Fuquan, or whomever for that write-up. It's a great write-up about how it all came from upswelling from the fact that we used to, meaning electeds, used to go into the prisons and actually have a conversation. Like, the sheriff does it now with campaigns. But people used to campaign in prison because they used to vote. And so there was this whole movement within the prisons to say we're going to create a PAC. And some folks were not happy about the inmates creating PACs and being able to run ads or whatever it may be. And that is what they revolted against. And of course, the people of the Commonwealth then voted that that's not something they would want to see again. And so I'm a strong advocate for us to vote at all levels. And my thought is, we are the least incarcerated state in the country. About 6,000 people in our state prisons, 6,200. About 6,400 in our county.
Okay.
It's 12,500 people.
Okay.
Right? I mean, so let everyone vote.
Okay.
Right? Because maybe in a district like mine, because it's going to be one of the most impacted districts, we have gone from when I was first elected in 2010, what the improvements we've made with mail-in voting, early voting, all of the other things we've done. We've gone from, in my first election, somewhere around 2,400 people voted out of 45,000.
Okay.
Now, in last year's elections, we got that up to 8,700.
Okay.
That's a long way.
It is.
And so we've made great improvements already.
That's great.
And so let's say, my district would probably be most impacted by some of the incarcerated folks. So maybe, 8,700 people vote. Maybe you'll get another 300, 400 in my district, right? Come on. Let the people vote. And so your question was, am I supportive of that? Absolutely.
Universal suffrage, felons being able to vote while they're incarcerated.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to be very clear because that question has been asked to Sheriff Tompkins, and he unequivocally said yes. He was pushed by Kevin Peterson to say, even for people who've murdered, yes. Even the person who has raped a child, as heinous as that is, yes.
Yeah, because just think, it's the last step, right? I mean, it's not like this Commonwealth has not made a lot of provisions. We're doing the opposite of what many states are doing already. And so there are a couple of last steps. One of them is also in the Voting Act. We wanted to also have same-day registration.
Same-day registration. Glad you went there.
And so that's the last step that we need to go on and make, because there's nothing wrong with that final last step too. I can just say when I think about Rep. Elagato, and one of the things we worked on hard was the peace officer standard in training. And you're talking about accomplishments. I have been following a bill that Jamal Crawford and I had worked on initially when I first came in. He had Professor Goldman and others. We were talking about just how do we get it so that police officers or peace officers are accountable. And you mentioned Mr. Floyd and his murder. A bill that I have been following for years all of a sudden rose to the top. Like, hey, what can we get done now that this has happened? And in this moment, what do we want to accomplish? There are 4 components. One was that we will now have it so that police officers are now certified or licensed. I mean, beauticians are licensed, manicures are licensed, you're licensed, I'm licensed, right? But police officers were not. So we said, hey, we want to be able to hold them accountable, be able to take their right to serve if they do something inappropriate. So that is the key component, post. So we had the post commission. Use of force around chokeholds and that nature was a part of it. What to do about some of the things you're talking about, the commissions around that Fuquan and all the folks set up at the AACC around structural racism. And the final component was what we're going to do about civil service, because our corrections officers, our police, our EMTs, our firemen, women, are not reflective of who we are as a society. And we had all those components in the bill, and so we thought we were there. There were 2 things that were outstanding that the advocate said we must have. One was qualified immunity that allows folks to sue the police officer. And the other was undocumented folks being able to drive. And so I'm getting a driver's license. And so we were at that crossroads last year, 2 sessions ago. Or it's last session, 2 years ago. And is where I had to just say to the group, look, guys, this governor is going to sign the 4 things that we said out the gate were most important. Qualified immunity is much more of a Supreme Court federal thing. And then let's come back to the undocumented license. And so finally, at the last moment, we were all agreeable. And so I said to the Black and Latino Caucus members, I will come back next year and nothing would be more of a priority than because there was some of our Latino members who saying, hey, this is our number 1 issue and you're not listening. And I had to remind them, wait a minute, they're Black people too. They're, the African American diaspora also has the same problem. Don't think this is just Latino. You get out of here. You get me? So, but I just said, we as a group said this will be our number 1 thing. And it was good to get that across the finish line as well this year. Obviously, that might be on the ballot. And so that's why I went through that long story that the SJC said that we have plenty of rights around some of the things we've done in the Voting Act, but they have not said that around this undocumented licenses. And so let's be aware that might be something we're going to need to vote on in November, and I'm hoping we show up strong for that.
In that same vein, you talk about IDs and the particular issues of our returning citizens. I mean, to me, I think it's criminal that people are released from incarceration, whether it's the Suffolk County House of Correction, whether it's upstate, with their prison ID. I mean,
but we're doing better.
Okay,
we are. And so Andy Peck, the undersecretary who oversees our prisons, has been working with Nika and all of you around just so many of these issues. And we're looking to, certainly the sheriff is looking to address them here in the county. We're looking to address them at the state level. Well, you know, because there are three things we need. They need some type of job, they need some housing, and they need some support from family, right? And so that leads me to that conversation that we made a very bad, I believe, advocates will strongly disagree with me, some. We thought we had, in this session, we thought we had it so that we would spend $20 million for all folks to have free calls.
Okay.
Right. We had gotten across the finish line. Gov sends back an amendment that attaches the conversation, or attaches this piece around new crimes, around folks taking off their ankle bracelet and creating a new charge. He had initially had it as a new charge as a felony, but then said, okay, I'm okay if you make it a misdemeanor in the first one, a felony on the second. And we were not willing to negotiate this. There was a whole wave to say, we believe basically Mara will be here next year and we can get what we've gotten done again. And I'm of the belief that you never make perfect the enemy of good. And I'm believing that because we ended up not signing that. And those 12,500 or 12,600 people are now going to be another year without free phone calls.
Let me just jump real quick, because my understanding, and I got some communication from Alameen, right, who's at the African American Coalition, and asked me to send it out to folks
I saw
that basically was saying, whoa, these are our concerns. While this looks good on its face, these are our concerns of implementation. And so
the concerns though were, or how much time do we get? And how often do we get phone calls?
And the language being that the agency really is up to the correctional officer.
Well, I said to them from the beginning, because I teach class. I think you know this.
No, but talk about that, because I hear that, but maybe people don't know that.
So I teach in the jail weekly. I was there yesterday in the House of Corrections, and I teach at the. So I teach at Suffolk Jail, Suffolk House of Corrections, and at DOC. I go and I teach financial literacy. Right? So yesterday, again, I was in one of these in-depth conversations with my class, like saying, didn't you know that we estimated that the cost of these calls would be about $20 million on what you're currently using? That does not mean that all of a sudden when we pass free calls that we expect you to be on this call 8 hours a day. Right. And so didn't you know there were going to have to be some restraints to the phone calls? We don't have, we don't have unlimited funds. And so when I was going through this conversation with them from the beginning, I was saying, hey guys, if we get you free phone calls, we're going to probably measure this in some way that, you still get a certain amount of phone calls a week or a day or whatever. Some people are using the calls none because they can't afford it or whatever. Everyone is going to have some measure of what the phone calls are. And then, of course, some folks can do it on a tablet. They can do the Wi-Fi. There's all types of things that they can do. And Securitas is doing their thing. And so what I still stand with saying is there are always going to be issues. But now we stand another year out with these folks not being connected with their families in the way they could be. And we do that because we said we're going to make perfect the enemy of the good. And so as a legislator, these are the calls I have to make. And is legal, and I should say, is the law going to be perfect for what I want? No. But there are 200 of us. And I have to get this thing passed through 200 of us. And so, and I got to get it signed by a governor. Right. And so we had it where we had enough votes to get this thing across the finish line. And I hate not delivering when I've been out talking about free phone calls for a year. That means I now feel as though I overpromised and underdelivered. And literally I was texting the governor at 3 o'clock in the morning on that night. I was texting the chair of Ways and Means on that night. I was texting the speaker saying, close this deal. Obviously, there were other people texting to say, let's not, and they didn't. But I do believe that was a bad choice.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that because, as even like the ballot box initiative, they passed one part. And it was interesting because I had to tell you, even in testifying, it was very interesting to me that the chair of the elections committee did not even know people incarcerated could vote. I mean, there's so many folks who don't know that.
Yep.
It just blows my mind.
And that's why we have to continually educate.
Yeah.
And that's why we have to just lead with facts, right? So I'm just a strong believer that we make the right choices in this Commonwealth when we lead with good facts. We don't get emotional.
Yes.
And we understand that getting some of what we want is better than getting none of what we want.
Sure.
And in this case, we got none of what we wanted. We wanted some free phone calls. And so I will again have that as a very important issue for me next year. But I hate having to come back to the same thing that I thought we'd already passed.
I understand. With that said, we're going to shift. I want to go to some of your compliments. So I see engaged constituent services, as you've already said, attended 2,500 community meetings during the last 12 years, teaches financial literacy, you just articulated that, cleans neighborhoods, straights weekly, Brook Charter School, KC Overpass.
I just started, so the way it works is I just started to just list just some of the issues that, so cleans neighborhood streets literally since I bought the home on Goodale Road, I literally have on the street cleaning day thrown a leaf blower on my back and pushed all the trash from one side of the street to the other to have the street cleaner come by and clean it up. And it's just my way of giving back to the neighborhood. But the rest of that list is just, hey, here are some of the things that took a lot of constituent services conversation. It took an awful lot to knock down that bridge at Forest Hills. I think I attended 43 meetings to get it to the point where we have gone from a neighborhood that had a bridge that was falling down to one that if you did not know that bridge was there, you wouldn't even know that there was ever a bridge there when you go through there now. And that was a tough call because when we started the conversation, I actually believed that we're going to just build another bridge. But then when you go through all the data, the data said, hey, build another bridge, you're going to have to knock it down in 50 years. So this $80 million you're spending now, I'm going to have to spend $300 million in 50 years. Does it make sense when you're really trying to solve congestion that is at 2.5 hours in the morning, 2.5 hours in the evening? There are another 19 hours of the day, right? Do you really need to spend this much money trying to solve for 5 hours? And we also saw that in both solutions, bridge or no bridge, my neighborhood would drive over the bridge, and then if you recall, you would drive over the bridge and then you come to immediately stop. Do you remember that? Because they still backed up in the rotary, right? And so it wasn't like you got over the bridge and then you were done getting on the Jamaica Way. Okay. You actually were going to still back up. And so now with a steady flow, red lights, and flow of traffic, most times now I don't see that back up at that rotary because it's all transition in a way that's more equitably.
And I see other things here. There's the Mattapan State Hospital site, Morton and Gallivan intersection. Morton
and Gallivan. You know Morton and Gallivan.
Yes.
In front of Norfolk Hardware.
Yes.
When we literally used to put our lives at risk every time we got in that intersection.
Okay.
And so when you think about Norfolk Hardware today, you think of a light. And we had just a large conversation with the community. Should that be a rotary? Should that be a roundabout? Should that be what it is now?
Right.
But we landed on, no, let's let the traffic engineers walk us through this. And now literally you get to that intersection and you actually don't feel like you're taking your life in danger every single time you get through it. Absolutely. Is it perfect? No. But did I let perfection be the enemy of good? No, we've come a long way. You know, in the same vein, as you talk about transportation, and we know that I know this meeting that happens tonight. In fact, I don't know if you want to talk about the meeting on tonight. That I believe it is color. What is it? Communities of color. Well, the communities of color. Daryl Smith and others are organizing the meeting tonight. That was really the follow up to a meeting that was up at Hibernian Hall. Okay. When a question was asked to the candidates about whether or not we should put a bus lane down Blue Avenue. And so following up that, now having a conversation at Morningstar about a bus lane primarily. There's some other topics they're going to talk about as well. And for me, it goes back to a phone call that at the time, the black president, Barack Obama, made to the black governor, Val Patrick, and said, let's put money in the middle of the black neighborhood when we were thinking about doing $127 million up and down Blue Avenue at the time. And we as a community said no. And so when folks say, hey, we haven't had this conversation, no, actually we've been having it for about 12 or 13 years. And so it is to continue to have the conversation about what's right. How do we get economic development? How do we get more better transit up and down Blue Avenue? Because we haven't had that busway or middle lane since the 1950s, when there used to be a streetcar down the middle of Blue Avenue. And so that'll be part of the conversation tonight, beginning at 6 o'clock, which is why I need to run, unfortunately.
Okay. All right. And with that said, we're really at the top of the hour. In any event, if there was any closing comments, statements, or whatever, the camera and a mic is yours to communicate to our audience.
I just want to say thank you for having me, and still ask the folks of your listening audience to go to my website, russellholmes.com, and you can get into much more in depth of the things that I've been working on, and certainly ask for your support on September 6th.
Thank you, Representative Holmes.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And thank you, our listening and viewing audience, for being with us. We're going to go to some music in our station ID. I will be back on the other side of the top of the hour.
We say to America is be true to what you said on paper.
I wish that I could freely dream and be judged from within, hunted by a power that cannot see past my skin. My views are viewed as ignorant, my truth always denied. My history is shrouded in a spider web of lies. Isn't this America? Or is this America all a lie?
Of the freedom of speech, somewhere I read. Of the freedom of press, somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right.
How can I pledge allegiance to a country built on lies, or raise my children to believe they're equal in its eyes? My leaders are assassinated for speaking their mind. So justice never tilts my way. I thought that she was blind. Isn't this America? Or is this America all a lie?
Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop.
Looking in the rearview mirror, terrified by lights, waiting for these paper laws to play out in my life. But now I lay awaiting death, staring in the sky, killed by those sworn to protect me. What a way to die. Isn't this America? Or is this America all a lie?
Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will, and He's allowed me to go up to the mountain, and I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
In St. Matthew 28:19, Jesus said, "Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost, and teaching them to